second chunk of this first round mock draft starts with the Chicago Bears back on the clock. And Trey, you termed this as the ultimate luxury pick. We've got them taking Rome Odunze from Washington. Could be just Caleb Williams' best friend right out of the chute.
Yeah, imagine those two together on the field like that. That's just fantastic. The best receiver that Caleb Williams has ever gotten to throw to, and a guy that legitimately has a case to be the first wide receiver taken in this draft, in my opinion. So Rome Odunze, just fantastic to watch at Washington this year. Chicago, we joked off camera, but DJ Moore, a solid wide receiver one, right? Like I don't think anybody's going to argue that. We've seen flashes of him. If you're a fantasy football player, you know that he can put up massive numbers on any given week, but I don't think anyone's going to confuse him with a guy that could potentially be the best wide receiver in the league in a few years. And I think Rome Odunze has put on tape that he has that in his repertoire. He could legitimately be pushing for one of the best receivers in the league 2 or 3 years from now.
I love him. I was high on him at the beginning of last season. I've carried the banner for Odunze. I will keep doing that. Bears offense would get really fun if they take Williams and Odunze again. As we keep going on into March, April, before the draft, I think you're going to see a lot of mock drafts where the Bears trade out of that pick at number one. Maybe they stay with Justin Fields, but today they get their franchise quarterback and his future wide receiver one. The Jets then take Olum Fashanu from Penn State. They protect Aaron Rodgers to make sure that his Achilles makes it to the second quarter. Garrett, as you joked while we were drafting, Jared Verse then comes off the board. He goes at 11 to the Minnesota Vikings, who need edge help. Really, really liked Verse last year. Might have lost a little bit of money by not coming out of the draft, but he's a very solid edge prospect. As you will see, we're a little bit higher on him than we are another guy that has been projected to go that high in Chop Robinson from Penn State. We'll talk about that later on. Trey, you didn't like this pick. JJ McCarthy at number 12 to your Denver Broncos. The case for him, as I described earlier, is QB is a disaster potentially next season, and Russell Wilson's contract is abysmal, right? I mean, it seems like they're going to cut him at the end of the preseason. How do you feel about JJ McCarthy, who's been described as a winner, has a great record in high school and college? How do you feel about them turning the reins over?
It could be worse. It definitely could be worse, but it's definitely a pick where the Broncos have backed themselves into a corner. They put all their eggs in the Russell Wilson basket a couple years ago, and that just obviously has not worked out for anybody. And look, I think if anybody can get JJ McCarthy to be at the level, obviously, Jim Harbaugh's in the NFL now, but Sean Payton would be a fantastic uh, head coach for JJ McCarthy in the NFL. JJ McCarthy has put a lot of good stuff on tape in college. Obviously, they weren't winning because of him all the time at Michigan. It wasn't always on his shoulders, but he stepped up and made a lot of big throws, especially in, go put that Rose Bowl tape on. And he was challenging two of the best cornerbacks in this draft, straight up. So I don't hate it. He would have a lot of good receivers to throw to in Denver, and that could definitely help him, hit the ground running. But for Denver, it's certainly a pick that they've backed themselves into, and it's kind of a necessity pick here at 12.
Man, I love the confidence coming out of Denver's camp right there. It could be worse coming at pick number 12.
I mean,
that's what you love hearing, right?
It could be Paxton Lynch. It could be Brock Osweiler. It could be, Trevor Siemian, a host of other guys.
And I'm sure that Broncos fans are hoping it doesn't turn out that way again, right? I mean, that's been a kind of abysmal attempt at finding a quarterback for a long time. Look, I mean, when I think about McCarthy, I think he's a lot better than he's getting credit for. I think a lot of people like to just trash him and look at some of the superficial numbers and say like, oh, he doesn't pass for a whole lot of yards and doesn't score a bunch of touchdowns. But when you look at his game, one of the things he does extremely well that I think will translate to the NFL is he does a really good job extending plays, keeping his eyes downfield, and throwing on the run, especially into some tight windows. You can look at that, especially against Ohio State this year, especially against Alabama this year. And yeah, a couple times in the national championship game, he was able to extend some plays and do some really good things. with his legs. He does a really good job rolling out and kind of extending, waiting until he's right up against the sideline, and then, finding his guy downfield. I'm curious to see what he could do at the next level with better receiver talent. This isn't necessarily to knock anyone at Michigan, but there's not necessarily the best receiver talent at Michigan. I'm curious to see what happens once those receivers get a little bit better, and if they can make a few more plays for him, maybe see what could happen. So, I don't know if you're going to necessarily get all of that at Denver. You got some good players up in Denver. They got some good receivers, but I'm curious to see what can happen if they can put the team around McCarthy. With the defensive McCarthy out of the way, I do think it's too high overall. I don't love that they would be taking him at 12, but I don't really see how you can get around it, right? Denver needs a quarterback. There's too many concerns with too many other guys on this board. And at the end of the day, you can at least say McCarthy wins games, and he's played at the high level, and he's won a championship in college. So you can at least say that for him, in addition to some of the athleticism things. And not necessarily a poor arm, but I don't think he has the elite arm talent that you're looking for necessarily. I don't think he has that in there. So, could he develop and be better? Yes. I'm just not sure what his ceiling is, if it's quite as high as some of these other guys you might be looking for.
I'm really curious to see if JJ can be a difference maker behind an offensive line that's not necessarily an award-winning offensive line right now. Lloyd Cushenberry, and I can't remember off the top of my head if Cushenberry is out of a contract or not. Quinn Miners has been one of the best guards in the NFL as well. Garrett Bowles has been what he has been at tackle for the Broncos. So it's been strikes and gutters. But can he stay upright, and can he deliver the football down the field at the NFL level? Those are the two big things that I'm looking for. He's got a good running back in Javonte Williams. So if they can get the ship moving in the right direction, I don't think it's hard for the Broncos to compete. But boy, you cannot keep whiffing at quarterback. That's what's held them back, it feels like, since Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl there. The Raiders, I think, dance the card up to the podium. They take J.C. Latham, tackle out of Alabama. Could be tackle number 1 on a lot of boards, depending on who you talk to. Jerzon Newton, one of my favorite prospects, defensive tackle from Illinois, goes 14 to the Saints. Now, in full transparency, we saw a mock draft getting ready for this that had him in the second round. I think that's beyond offensive. Jerzon Newton had some of the best tape and grades from a interior defensive lineman in college football history. He was a literal pass rusher from the nose tackle spot. No, by the way, he's going to stuff the run. So New Orleans needs interior defensive line help.
Thinking Ndamukong Suh, honestly, like
yes.
that's the guy that, if you haven't watched him, Illinois doesn't get a lot of national coverage all the time, but he's Ndamukong Suh.
He's filthy.
And if you're one of those young kids who hadn't seen Suh play in a little while, think Lions Suh, not end of his career Suh.
Yeah, definitely. Or Nebraska Suh.
Amen to that. Indianapolis Colts, we gave Laitu Latu, the edge rusher out of UCLA, some injury concerns. I think questions of whether or not he's going to be polished enough for the NFL level to go this high. But a lot of folks around war rooms are high on Latu, so he goes 15 to the Colts.
Gracious him! How about that?